Welcome to the Before Slavery Experience Museum, our webinar series, and we're so happy today to welcome a guest, return guest. We're excited to hear all the things that have been going on with Dr. Theron Williams. First, let me tell you a little about Before Slavery. The Before Slavery Experience Museum is a new museum coming to the Metro Atlanta area. It delves into the history of African Americans, not about slavery, not about the civil rights, not about our, wonderful inventors or artists or scientists, etc. But we start in the 1600s and we go back in time to show the societies from which we came, how we lived, and how we governed ourselves and what we believe. So the Before Slavery Museum is something, it's a topic that's not much talked about, but that is definitely changing. And you will see more of what I'm talking about with our guest today, Dr. Theron D. Williams. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He is the pastor of Mount Carmel Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. And he's the founding president of the Bible is Black History Institute. He's a professor and a scholar, a professor at the Jeremiah Wright Social Justice, for the Jeremiah Wright Social Justice concentration in the Doctor of Ministry program at Virginia Union University. His latest book release is The Bible is Black History and Beyond. He also has several other books, including the bestseller, The Bible is Black History. But I've also seen many and bought many of his children's books to share with young people here in our ministry in Atlanta. He earned his bachelor's in psychology and a master in divinity, and those are also at Virginia Union University. He completed his doctoral studies at the Chicago Theological Seminary. He's a father and a grandfather and resides in Indianapolis, Indiana. Please help me welcome Dr. Theron D. Williams. So Dr. Williams, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we are certainly happy to have you today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself besides the, academic side?
Well, I guess you covered it all in your intro. I mean, yeah, that's about it. That about covers it.
Mm-hmm. Tell us, how did you get started in this journey originally?
Well, I've always had it in the back of my mind that there was something not quite right with the images that we traditionally are confronted with in the Bible. Something was wrong with those white images. And not only were the white images problematic to me, but the theology that correspond with the images were not quite. I felt something was missing. I felt something was not quite different, because the Bible story, as it was told to me from a white evangelical perspective, did not resonate with me. It did not jive with my story growing up as a young Black kid, growing up in the Detroit, Michigan, in the hood. And then I would go to church, and our church was located right near the hood, right near the Jeffridge Projects. And of course, it was all Black folks living in the projects, who were all poor, obviously, because that's where poor people mainly live, particularly the working poor. I'm not talking about people who refuse to work or anything like that. These were working poor people. And when we would go to church, we would see all of these images in the stained glass window over the baptistry, in the literature, of white people being the champions and the heroes of the Bible. And then how the story was told, it was as if it was a white man who died on the cross to save everybody, and that white Jesus, white Moses, everybody was white. And ever since I was a kid, that didn't quite sound right to me, but I was afraid to say anything because you don't question the Bible. I'm from that school. You don't question the Bible. You don't question the church. You don't question anything that has to do with God. You just accept what you're told. And so I didn't say anything. And so I thought something was wrong with me because I never said anything. But when I went away to college, undergraduate school, I felt the same way. It wasn't until I got to seminary that I met theological professors who understood the Bible differently from a Black perspective. And they were talking about Black theology, and I was introduced to theological giants like James Cone and J.D. Otis Roberts and John Kinney and other Black theologians who had a different perspective, a different narrative of what the Bible was. But even that, they still didn't deal with the ethnic makeup of the people of the Bible. It wasn't until I graduated from seminary and completed a doctorate, then I started thinking about, okay, let's look at this, because the location of Israel, it is actually in northeast Africa. It's on the continent of Africa. How is it that everybody else is Black except this group of people here in Northeast Africa? And so I started putting things together. These are Black folks, these are Black people. And so that has always resonated with me for the last 25, 30 years. But it wasn't until I started noticing a defection of young people from our church. This is maybe 5 or 6 years before the pandemic. I started noticing how millennials weren't coming to church. We have a pretty large congregation up here in Indianapolis, and it started shrinking. And it wasn't the older people who were defecting, it was my young people. And I wanted to figure out what was going on. I thought I had done something. I thought I had said something. I thought they had heard a rumor or something and were all mad at me. And so I invited them all to church so we can talk about it. And so about 80 or 90 young people came together, and we had this large meeting. And I said, hey, look, y'all, tell me what's going on. Did I do anything? Is it? And surprisingly, many of the people who had defected came back only because they respected me. So I was relieved by that. But then they started talking about some of the stuff that they had been hearing on the internet, they had been getting from social media, and then sharing this information on social media. And social media has algorithms that the more you talk about a certain topic, the more that algorithm group you with a group of people who think the same way, who do the same likes, who have the same comment. So you have literally a virtual community of people who all think the same way. And they were questioning the historicity of Jesus. They didn't think Jesus was real, but that he was an invention of the Roman government. They questioned the authenticity of the Bible. They thought the Bible was an instrument of oppression that white folks used to keep us docile and subservient to white supremacy system. They thought that the church had lost its relevancy and its efficacy. They didn't believe the church. They thought it was just one big money grab for greedy preachers. I said, hey, wait a minute. You guys grew up here. I'm not that type of preacher. Oh, we don't mean you, Pastor. But the other things that we talked about, we got a problem with. I said, tell you what, give me an opportunity. Let's meet 4 weeks on Wednesday night. Give me an opportunity to at least challenge your assumptions if I cannot refute them, because I know I can refute everything you said, but at least give me the opportunity. So they showed up one Wednesday night, and we did the Bible study. They came back and brought friends the next one, then the next one. And that 4-week Bible study turned into a 9-month series because I was learning more and more and more. And when it was all over, many of them had a change of heart. Some of them did leave and never came back because they were convinced. But it did impact. And so they came to me and said, can you put this together in book form? because I want to give it to friends. I'm like, okay, since I had done all the research, I threw it together book form, put it on Amazon, and looked at Amazon maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, and my book was the #1 new release. Then I started getting all of these phone calls and invitations to do podcasts and to do speaking engagements and all that. So I had to go back and rewrite it because I didn't employ the best scholarship methods when I wrote it the first time, because it wasn't for the general public. It was just for my church and for a few people who are my friends who knew about it. That's all I intended to do, but it had such a major impact once you put it up there on Amazon and that type of thing. Um, so that was it. And it took off, and I'm all over the place in the United States and abroad, virtually and in person. And in fact, that's how you and I met,
Mhm.
through that book. You got a hold to it somehow, and we were able to connect and talk more about it. So yeah, that's how it started.
Wow, that's right. So, once that initial reception, it just took off, and I saw you interviewing on television, and so people were really taking notice. So I know that you went back, and now we have a sequel to that book. I know you've gone further in depth. You've incorporated some other information because as you uncover it and learn it, you're willing to, and that's one beautiful thing about you. You're willing to share, as you gain more information, solid information that's irrefutable, and
Mm.
you're going to continue to share. So, what was it that took place that made you go back to the writing board and add more to the story?
Well, as I went around lecturing and teaching about this subject matter, I would always have a Q&A at the end of each session. And brilliant people, were asking questions. They were challenging different things and um, uh, asking me for more information on different sections of the book. And so I collected all of that. I kept a journal of all of the questions that people were asking and my responses to those questions. So I would leave a workshop and I would go straight back to the hotel and I will memorialize all of the stuff that I had said and what the people had said, the questions and answers. And I kept that in a journal. And just recently, I opened that journal, re-looked at it, and said it's time for me to put out a sequel because, um, number one of the things that I did not deal with, and many of the people in my audiences wanted me to deal with more, is the origin of the European Jews. They were asking if the Bible is Black history, and if the Jews of the Bible were Black, how did they turn white? Like, we're convinced that the Bible story is about a story of people who call themselves Hebrews, Israelites, or Jews, and we're convinced that they were Black. Where did the white Jews come from? And my last book deals with the origin of the European Jewry, and it also deals with the origin of the African Jewry. So those two, I deal with, and it's very appropriate, especially what's going on over there right now. You got Hamas, and you have the Israelis in Palestine, and that all of that fighting and stuff going on over there. So that chapter came in handy just in time. I've had people to call me from around the country who read the book, and they say, "Okay, I get it now. I understand what's going on over there um, in Palestine." So that was very important.
Wow. Yeah, very important. You're right. I'm going to share the screen now for a second and just let everybody get a look here at your latest book as it slowly loads. I'll tell you. So you're back on the circuit, out going, around sharing this. Um, the Bible is Black history and beyond. More and more people are becoming aware. And how is it being received by other churches?
Um, it's wherever I go, whether it's a church or a community venue, it goes over very well. I mean, people are hungry for this information, so much so that we are starting an online Bible is Black History Institute where you can get online and you can see it. You can be educated online through our institute, and hopefully that would launch sometime in January. We are praying that we will be able to get it all together by January. So it's a 36-week program. There's seven courses, 4 quarters. There are 2 courses per quarter, and then the final quarter there is only 1 course. And you'll get a certificate of completion from the Bible is Black History Institute. You will get continuing education college units from Virginia Union University. And yeah, the books, all the books except 2 are included in the tuition. We haven't set the price for the tuition yet, but we have determined that all of the books that will be required, all of the articles that will be required are included as a part of the tuition. And so we're really excited about that. And one of the classes literally deals with the African jury versus the European jury. And one of the things, Pat, about the European jury, their story is really interesting. They contend that in the 7th century, with the Arab Muslims started taking over everything, Northern Africa, and I consider Palestine or Israel a part of Northern Africa and all of the Levant. The Arab Muslims had taken over all of that, started in the 7th century. That's why even today, when you go to Northern Africa, the predominant religion is Islam, because the Arab Muslims, had invaded and had colonized all of that and had proselytized everybody to Islam. And so the European Jews said, that's when we left Palestine and we migrated north to Europe, and we settled in Southern Europe because we were running from religious persecution, and we found haven in Southern Europe. And then at the beginning of the Middle Ages, they relocated to Eastern Europe, and from there began to continue the perpetuation of the religion that they say they had inherited from their forebears, the Israelites of Judah. And so now they got the entire world thinking that they are the descendants of the biblical Israelites, which, according to one of their major scholars, not Shlomo Sands, he's another scholar who wrote The Invention of the Invention of the Hebrew People, but Walter, what is his last name? Arthur Koestler. Arthur Koestler, in his book, The 13th Tribe, Arthur Koestler said that notion is probably the biggest hoax ever perpetuated on human history. But he says that they have no genetic connection to the biblical Israelites, but that they emerged in the Caucasus, a people called the Khazars. They are the descendants of the Khazars, who converted to Judaism in the 7th century, making Khazaria a Jewish nation, not by religion, not by ethnicity or race, but by religion. Because you had 2 other superpowers. You had Christianity with Constantinople in the Byzantine Empire, and then you had the Ottoman Empire up there in Baghdad, which had embraced Islam. So you got Islam on one side, you got Christianity on the other. And one thing about all empires, they need a religion, because they need a God that they can control to justify their domination of other people. So the Byzantine Empire had Christianity, and Jesus was their dominator. The the Ottoman Empire, the Arab Muslims had Muhammad, Islam, and Muhammad was their dominator, or Allah was their dominator. And so you got the Khazarian Empire that's between the two. So now, what would our religion be? They were practicing a form of shamanism, but shamanism wasn't prominent enough for it to be the religion of the state. So they said, what religion will we be? If we go with Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire and embrace Christianity, it's going to tick off the Muslims. If we embrace Islam, it's going to tick off the Christians. So we got an idea. We'll take Judaism, because the sacred text for Judaism is both in the Quran and in the Bible. So they said this is politically expedient. So we're not taking off anybody, because both of these religious factions embrace the religious text, the Torah of Judaism. And so that's how they became a Islamic nation, through conversion rather than inheriting it from their descendants. And then you have a lot of DNA evidence to suggest that they did not descend from the Middle East. Now, you do have some Euro Jews who may have the DNA that links them to the Levant, to what they call the Middle East, which is a misnomer. That's a geopolitical creation. You know, it's either Asia or it's Africa. There's no Middle East. And I get into that whole Middle Eastern piece in the book as well. But suffice to say, we call it the Levant. It covers the area that the Middle East is said to cover, a smaller part of it, nevertheless. But anyway, there are some European Jews who have the DNA that link them to the Levant. But because you have DNA that links you to the Levant doesn't mean automatically that you're from Israel. Because you got Syria, you have Iran, you have Iraq, you have other nations that are part of the Levant. So that's not good enough. And even if you do have that DNA, it's because there were biblical Israelites who did flee from Judah, and they did come to Khazaria. And Arthur Koestler, in his book, identifies the appearance of Black Jews after Khazaria became a Jewish state. You know, there were Black, he talks about these Black people. He didn't know who they were, but we know who they were. These Black people who look different, which suggests that they did not originate from the Caucasus area, but they migrated there, fleeing religious persecution. And when they got there, they integrated with some of the Khazarian people, and they left behind their DNA footprint. So if there are people who are of Ashkenazi Jews, because the Khazars are the forebears of the Ashkenazi Jews. If an Ashkenazi Jew has a genetic link to Palestine, it's because of the miscegenation they had with Black Jews who migrated north and settled in Khazaria, which had become a Jewish state by then. So, but they have convinced the entire world. As a matter of fact, that's why they were awarded the land of Israel in 1948, because they had convinced the United Nations that they were the descendants of the biblical Israelites, and Israel was their ancestral homeland. But it's not. The biggest lie ever told.
Wow, that's powerful. So for those of our viewers who are joining us for the first time, can you share with us why some would say the area that some call the Middle East, or the area that is of land that is Israel, is really a part of northeastern Africa? Can you go through that a little bit about, the Suez Canal and
Yeah, well, That area that we're talking about, the area in question, it was all black before the 7th century with the Arab invasion. It's Africa. Africans are black people. And we never question the racial makeup of ancient Europeans, though we have no pictures of them or anything. We just assume they were white because of their European ancestry. We never question ancient Chinese's color. We assume that because they're Chinese, that they will have a yellow tint to their skin. We never questioned Indians, the people of ancient India. We never questioned what they look like by virtue of the fact they are Indians. We assume that they have a reddish tint to their skin. But when it comes to Africans, now we want to question, especially when those Africans emerge from Palestine, uh, Egypt, Ethiopia, and other Northern African civilizations. And the reason we want to disconnect those African states from Africa so that it can continue to perpetuate the narrative that nothing good came from Africa. So we've got to separate these countries in the academic imagination. And there are a lot of people right now who are academics who have the credentials and all of that. In their writings, they'll say something like, it happened in Egypt and in Africa. Well, you can't cut Egypt off of Africa. So in the Bible days, all of that was black, and Israel was physically connected to Egypt, making Israel a part of the Egyptian landmass, which is connected to Africa, which makes it an African nation. John Mbidi, the great African scholar, he's a scholar on African religion and traditions. He argued that Judaism and Christianity are actually African religions because they were founded and developed in Africa. Both of them are. And so all of that was connected because, in the biblical story, Jesus' parents took him and they fled to Egypt because Herod was after him. So they fled to Egypt. They didn't have to take a ship over there. They got on a camel or a horse or whatever, and they migrated to Egypt without having to cross a body of water, which provides the definition of what a continent is. It's one of the 7 large contiguous land masses surrounded by 2 or more major water expanses. So if you don't have to cross a major water expanse, you didn't leave the continent. You're on the same continent. But in the late 1800s, the Suez Canal, it was a canal. And it wasn't for nefarious reasons. It was for commercial reasons because the Suez Canal to the north is the Mediterranean Sea. And then you have the Red Sea area, which was a seaport because it was a lot of money back there. It was a lot of trade was going on back there because you had access to Europe, Africa, and Asia right there in the Red Sea area. But in order to access that harbor, the Red Sea area, they had to go 4,500 miles out of the way, all around they had to go to the Atlantic Ocean, all the way down to the Indian Ocean, and then back up and access the Red Sea from the Indian Ocean. They got smart. They said, why don't we just cut a canal right here? And so Europe can come straight across the Mediterranean and access the Red Sea area. I wish I had a map so I can show you, and access the Red Sea area. So they blew all of that land up, and that's what separated Israel from Egypt, the Suez Canal. But prior to that, it was a landmass that was contiguous.
This is our before slavery website. The Before Slavery Experience Museum will be hosting a fundraiser on December 17th here in the Metro Atlanta area. It is called Dancing Through Black History. As I said, it will be on the 17th from 3 to 5:30 at Taylor Bronner Park on Atlanta Road in Smyrna, Georgia. Our local celebrity mistress of ceremony, Twanda Black, will be leading the way. I also wanted you to see, so I'm not sure what this, here we go. All right. Also would like for you to see our Before Slavery t-shirt. Everyone who is attending today's webinar, we invite you to answer a quick survey at the end. It will load at the end of the webinar, and you will see a link. If you put your email address in the survey, you will be entered in a drawing for a free Before Slavery t-shirt. And at our next webinar, the winner will be announced and we will mail it to you. Meanwhile, those of us who do not get one for free, you can buy one on our website. The website is beforeslavery.com. We also have a book that was written. It's a compilation of poetry written by young women ages 18 to 25. And these young ladies are from all over the diaspora, writing about their impression or their experience as being Black women, Black young women across the diaspora. So we encourage you to get one of those books. It will help to support these young ladies and also the museum. And of course, your donations are greatly appreciated to help us open the doors of the Before Slavery Experience Museum. Like I said before, it's an immersive experience. You will feel as though you know firsthand what it was like to live on the continent and beyond before the transatlantic slave trade. So, and this is another book, actually. Let's do a quick view. It's called Every Human Needs to Know. It came out quite some time ago, and it delves in depth with the name Yahweh, and I wanted to definitely share that. You can find it on pureheartpublishing.com under books. So that goes further into discussions about the name of Yahweh. And I was just excited to see that in your book.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. All right. So back to the Bible is Black History and Beyond. Tell us something that surprised you in your research.
Well, what caused me to write this book is that, okay, the Bible is the history of a Black people. Okay, we get that. But so what? What does it mean beyond that? How does it impact us in 2023? The fact that first century people and going all the way back to the beginning, these were Black people. So the question is, what does that do for me today? What difference does it make? And in my book, The Bible is Black History and Beyond, I wanted to go beyond that idea that the biblical Israelites were Black people. So I dealt with the so what of it, and what I found remarkable is that the idea that the biblical Israelites were Black should influence the way we think about the Bible, the way we understand the Bible, the way we shape and construct our theologies, the way we do religion. It should reflect all of that. And it's one of the things that our young people, Pat, are starving for. They want a religion that they are ethnically a part of the God story. And that's one thing the Black church has been moving slow to make the connection. These young people want to see themselves as a part of the God story, which is one of the things that gave rise to the Black Hebrew Israelites. They're saying traditional Christianity doesn't go far enough. So what we are doing, we are looking at the biblical story and we are placing ourselves at the center of that story because our ancestors were a part of that story. And don't sleep on Black Hebrew Israelites. It is a growing movement around the country and around the world. It is growing rapidly, and people are jumping ship from the Black church, and especially young people connecting with that movement, because finally we have a religion that puts us as an ethnic Black people at the center of that story. And the Black church should have learned back in the day, back in the 50s, with the emergence of the Nation of Islam, with Malcolm X and that crowd. People were, especially Black men, were leaving the church in droves to connect. And the question is why? Because finally we have a religious tradition that connects Black people to the center of the story. It's about us. It's about Allah's activity in Black life. But then you go to church and you still have these white biblical images. They haven't dealt with the ethnic makeup of the biblical Israelites. They're still dealing with white evangelical Christianity. And in my previous book, Black Church, White Theology, I have a long discussion about how white evangelicalism is designed to keep in place systems of domination. Because we live in a domination system with white people at the top. And as you descend that hierarchy, the darker the colors become till you reach the bottom, and that's where people of African descent are. When you have Black theology, one of the things Black theology does is that it seeks to collapse that hierarchy so that everybody can have equal access to power and wealth. When you look at womanist theologies, women are at the bottom as well. So womanist theology emerges. It too seeks to collapse that hierarchy. Liberation theology, which is mainly the theology of the poor, they are on the bottom of that hierarchy as well. So you got womanist theology, Black theology, liberation theology, all these theologies emerging out of this hierarchical power domination, trying to collapse it. At the top, you got white evangelical theology. White evangelical theology is not trying to collapse that hierarchy, but it's trying to create theological justification to keep the hierarchy in place, because it is to white advantage that that hierarchy stay in place, because it secures their place at the top of the hierarchy. So now you've got a white evangelical theology that's practiced in Black churches, which essentially is Black churches participating in their own oppression. So we needed a theological construction to help collapse that hierarchy, because it has kept us at the bottom since 1619. And Malcolm X was trying to tell them this back in the 50s, but they called Malcolm X a thug, a gangster. They called him a Black nationalist who was trying to start a racial war. They had all type of stuff they were saying about Malcolm, and those characterizations didn't come from the Black church. It came from white folks. And Black people consumed white people's opinion about Malcolm and started reproducing it till they forgot about Malcolm. But Malcolm turned out to be right. You know, he turned out to be correct. And so we are seeing it all over again. with the Black Hebrew Israelites, they are saying the exact same thing in essence that Malcolm was saying. Where are we in this story? So you got young people who are saying we are at the center of the story, and we're going to build us a religious tradition around the reality that we are the descendants of the biblical Israelites. And the church, again, is just sitting here watching it happen without addressing this situation. So you asked me what was surprising. I don't believe anything was that much surprising, but that the conversation needs to go beyond we are the original, that Black people are the original biblical Israelites. It needs to go beyond that. It needs to influence how we understand the biblical text and how we understand Christianity. That Christianity is not a white man's religion. John S.M. Beatty, the African scholar, says no, Christianity is an African religion, and we need to appreciate it as such.
And to, embrace the tradition that the scriptures speak of, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what the word says,
Yes.
and embrace the creator himself, so
Yes.
that our personal relationship with him is what
Yes.
shines through and is what directs us.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's important.
So do you anticipate further studies in this area? I mean, do you see this going further?
The next step, I've touched on it briefly, is the launching of our online institute. This, because wherever I go, it's normally for 3 days or less, and that's really not enough time to get through. And the lecture may last for 55 minutes, and then you get a 10-15 minute Q&A session. It's just too much stuff, and I end up having to go back the next year, and then the next year, and then the next year, and it never stops. So I said, what we could do is we can take all of the information, put it in curricular form, put it as an online institute, because it's at least 36 weeks worth of stuff that you need to get, and just make that available for our community. And so that's the next thing that we are attempting to do.
The things, just so that. So we're going to take another commercial break, so to speak. Last week, our guest was the Abreem Homeschoolers Convention, which is coming up November 22nd and 23rd in LaGrange, Georgia. You can find it online at eventbrite.com, and they're going to have all kinds of resources and books and curriculum and whatnot that homeschoolers can use, so that they can teach their children from a historical standpoint. More information about this very topic. What are three main insights that you would like everyone to get and like really emphasize? And I encourage everybody to please get the book. You will enjoy it. He's a wonderful writer. The material is authentic, and I know you'll enjoy it. So, Dr. Williams, what are three main insights?
Well, given the political climate we're in right now, geopolitical climate, I would want our listeners to know that the Europeans that you see over in Israel are not the descendants of the biblical Israelites. That in 1948, after World War II ended, before World War II ended, Britain had moved out. The Ottoman Empire had collapsed, had folded, had fallen, which was inspired by Islam. It had collapsed. Great Britain took over, and Great Britain had colonized Northern Africa and Israel. At the end of World War II, Great Britain said, we don't want Israel anymore. What are we going to do with it? Gave that decision over to the United Nations. So in 1948, the United Nations voted to give part of Palestine to white people who call themselves Jews, essentially putting a European country in Africa. Prior to that, there were no European countries in Africa. But the United Nations said, we want a European country and we want it in Africa. So they gave it to Europeans. And now you have a European country over in Africa. But when they gave it over to the Europeans, they said part of it would be for the Europeans, the other part would be for the Arab Muslims, which had 750,000 people living over there by the end of World War II. There were only 100,000 European Jews living there. So the Arab Muslims said, this is ours. We've been here for 11 centuries. This land is ours. And so the United Nations said, no, but the ancestral homeland, this is the ancestral homeland of the Jews. And these Jews are these white people. So based upon that, we're going to give it to them and y'all split it. What's been happening is that the conflict is that people keep encroaching on each other's territory. You got the Europeans over there who keep encroaching on Palestine, taking more and more and more of their land. And so they push back and say, you can't keep doing this to us. And so you have conflict. And Bible readers tend to believe that this conflict goes all the way back to biblical times when you have the descendants of Abraham. You got Isaac and you have Ishmael. And Ishmael is said to have been the father of the Arabs. And you've got Isaac, who is the father of the Jews. And so they've been fighting over this land since the book of Genesis. But that's not true. There are no conflicts between Israelites and Arabs in the Bible. Never. No conflicts at all. As a matter of fact, Islam didn't become a religion until 700 years after the death of Jesus. Islam is not mentioned in the Bible. So there has not been a long, drawn-out struggle over that land in the Bible. It's just not. That's why I tell people, just pick up your Bible and read it. It's not there. The struggles that Israel had, the nations, was with Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and the Roman Empire. No, there were sixes. Oh, it's the Egyptians, Canaanites, Babylonians, Assyrians, Persians, and Romans. That's who they had a struggle with, not the Arabs. The Arabs are not even a small part of the biblical story. So when you hear other people with this narrative, oh, that struggle has been going on since biblical times. No, it hasn't. It's been going on since 1948, when they've been arguing and bickering over this land. Mainly the Europeans keep encroaching on Palestine, just keep moving. And the Palestinians are saying, enough is enough. You know, you took our land to start with, which is what Europeans do. They go to other countries and they take people's land. They came to what is known today as the United States and they took it. They went to Australia, and they took it. They go to other parts of Africa and they take it. That's what they do. It is called the European expansion, and they're still doing it even to this day. You know, so you have to point it out and call a spade a spade. So you want to know, the first thing that I would like for your audience to realize is that those are not the biblical Israelites. The biblical Israelites has been dispersed all over the world, mainly in Africa. And I point that out when I deal with the African Jewry in my book, Bible is Black History and Beyond.
So please tell us, where can we get your books?
You can get them at BibleIsBlackHistory.com, or you can get them on Amazon. But I would prefer that you go to BibleIsBlackHistory.com.
Yes, it has been a pleasure. I am so glad that you joined us today, and we were able to look at this new book, The Bible is Black History and Beyond. It's been a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, remember to answer your survey at the end. We're coming at the end now. We want to remind you also to visit the website, beforeslavery.com. Support this effort so that we can open the doors. This is something we have to do together. It can only be done if we do it together. So, and it's going to happen. So, special thanks to our sponsors, Praise Factor, Wondy Radio, Classy K's, and Grits and Eggs. Those are both delicious restaurants locally here in the Atlanta area. And we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Dr. Williams, thank you again.
Thank you for having me, Pat. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you.
All righty. Bye-bye.